The Battle Against a Fake HOA, A Tale of Community Triumph. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Meadowview, a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Springfield, where the lawns were green, the mailboxes mismatched, and the community thrived without the iron grip of a homeowners association. I was at the Meadowview Dog Park, tossing a well-loved tennis ball for my golden retriever, Buddy, when I first spotted the flyer. It was laminated, zip-tied to the chain-link fence, and written in a bold, almost comical font that screamed self-importance. The heading read, Notice of Community Standards Enforcement. It wasn't from the city or the Parks Department. Instead, it bore the seal of something called the Meadowview Community Enhancement Council. Below, in a font I later learned was Comic Sans, it declared that all residents within a 5-mile radius were now subject to rules on cleanliness, leash quality, and lawn maintenance effective retroactively from the previous week. Buddy and I were already in violation, apparently. A woman in oversized sunglasses and a pristine cardigan stood nearby, clutching a clipboard like it was a scepter. She tapped her pen against it, eyeing Buddy's collar with the intensity of a health inspector. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp as a tack. "That dog's tags are outdated." I blinked, caught off guard. "He's got a microchip and a city license. That's all that's required." She pulled a form from her stack with a flourish, like she was serving me a subpoena. "Not anymore. We've adopted regional best practices from top-tier HOAs nationwide. It's for the betterment of the community." I asked who we was. She squinted, as if I'd asked her to explain quantum physics. "The council," she said. "I'm acting President Linda Harper. I didn't live in an HOA. My house, a cozy 1960s ranch on the edge of Meadowview, was in a free-zone neighborhood built before such associations existed. But Linda didn't seem to care about that. She was on a mission, and I was in her crosshairs. That night, I posted a photo of the flyer to our neighborhood Facebook group, expecting a few laughs. Instead, the responses flooded in like a dam had burst. I got a notice for non-compliant trash cans, one neighbor wrote. Another shared a picture of her poodle in a sweater, captioned, cited for canine fashion violations. It was absurd, almost funny, until I read about the $50 fines payable to a P.O. box labeled Meadowview Unity Fund. I checked with the county. No such council existed. The post office confirmed the box was registered to Linda Harper. This wasn't a prank, it was a power grab. By the end of the week, Linda escalated. She slapped a neon sticker on my driveway, citing my sedan for unauthorized overnight parking. Buddy barked every time she passed our house, and I couldn't blame him. She strutted like she owned the sidewalks. I called the city, and they were sympathetic but unhelpful. "We've had complaints," they said, "but unless she's impersonating law enforcement, it's a civil matter." Linda was towing the line, but she hadn't crossed it yet. On Saturday, I caught her taping another flyer to the dog park gate. I marched over, Buddy at my side. "You can't just invent an HOA," I said. She gave me a smile that could melt steel. "We prefer Community Enhancement Council. You'll find we're self-governing." I shot back. "That's not how governance works." Her lips tightened. "You'll hear from us again, Mr. Thompson. Some people need a push toward compliance." The next day, a folded paper arrived in my mailbox, printed in bold red ink, Notice of Intent to Evict for Noncompliance. That's when I knew Linda wasn't just playing pretend. She was declaring war. I took the eviction notice to City Hall, expecting to be laughed out of the building. Instead, the clerk's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared. "This isn't from a licensed authority," she said, flipping the paper over like it was radioactive. "An eviction? That's bold." She called in her supervisor, who called in a city attorney named Mark Reynolds. He read the notice like it was a crime scene report. "She signed this as president of the Meadowview Community Enhancement Council?" he asked, tapping Linda's signature. "Yep," I said. "There's no such council." He leaned back, peering over his glasses. "I don't say this often, but this smells like fraud." Hope flickered in my chest. Validation, at last. But Mark was cautious. If she's not pretending to be a government official, and people are paying her voluntarily, it's messy. Civil court messy. I asked what I could do. He gave a thin smile. "A formal cease and desist letter might stop her. If you want to make it sting, get a judge to sign it." That sparked an idea. My cousin, Emily, worked as a clerk for Judge Daniel Carter. When I showed her the notice, she laughed. "She signed this. Dan's gonna love this. He hates fraud and loves a good showdown." 2 days later, I had a cease and desist letter on city letterhead, Judge Carter's signature bold and unmistakable at the bottom. Meanwhile, Linda got bolder. She posted a flyer at the local library, demanding mandatory landscaping uniformity in Meadowview-approved colors: white, cream, or muted terracotta. Anything too vibrant was subject to remediation. The librarian, Sarah, whispered to me. She tried to get me to remove the Pride Month display, said it clashed with the community aesthetic. My blood boiled. Linda wasn't just making rules, she was weaponizing them to control everything she didn't like. That afternoon, I found Linda outside the library, pulling weeds in a matching visor and gloves, her version of civic duty. "Linda Harper?" I asked, holding out a manila envelope. She looked up, annoyed. "Yes." I handed it to her. "You're ordered to cease all activities related to the so-called Meadowview Community Enhancement Council." She scoffed, then froze when she saw Judge Carter's signature. "This is outrageous," she sputtered. "I have community support." I shrugged. Not enough to override a courtroom. Her face turned the color of her forbidden petunias, and she stomped off, the envelope crumpled in her fist. I thought that was the end, but Linda didn't retreat, she reloaded. That night, she hosted a community feedback session in the parking lot of a shuttered department store. Her crowd was small, maybe 6 folding chairs, but she live-streamed it like she was running for mayor. "We're being threatened by outside agitators," she declared, pacing dramatically. "But we won't let our standards be trampled." I watched the stream 3 times, stunned. She was framing herself as a victim, twisting the judge's order into intimidation tactics. Then she went further. "I've consulted legal advisors," she said, "probably some Reddit moderator. We'll pursue private enforcement options starting now." The next morning, I woke to a neon orange sticker on my front door: "Quarantined. Community Health Safety Zone." My dog park access card was deactivated. My Amazon packages vanished. Linda wasn't using flyers anymore, she was escalating to full-on intimidation. The neon orange sticker on my door felt like a declaration of war, a garish symbol of Linda Harper's audacity. It wasn't just the sticker's bold claim "Quarantined, Community Health Safety Zone" that set my teeth on edge. It was the seal at the bottom, authorized by MCC Security Division. Linda had gone beyond flyers and fake fines. She'd created a fictional enforcement arm, complete with a logo that looked like it was designed in a middle school art class. I peeled the sticker off, my hands shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. Buddy, my golden retriever, sensed my mood and growled softly at the crumpled paper in my hand. That afternoon, while walking Buddy near the Meadowview bus depot, I saw them, 3 men in reflective vests labeled MCC Security, strutting around with clipboards and dollar store earpieces like they were guarding a military base. They stopped a skateboarder, a lanky kid named Jake, and handed him a citation for noise pollution. I approached after they left. "What was that about?" I asked. Jake shrugged, holding the slip. "They said I broke the Community Tranquility Protocol. They're keeping a file on me." "A file?" I almost laughed. "A file where? In a shoebox?" But Jake's worried expression stopped me. This wasn't funny anymore. I filed a report at the police station. The desk officer, a grizzled man named Officer Daniels, nearly choked on his coffee. MCC Security? Sounds like something from a bad sci-fi flick. But the humor faded when I showed him the quarantine sticker and the deactivated dog park card. He leaned back, rubbing his chin. "This is bold, but unless she's committing a clear crime, it's still civil. Keep documenting everything." I left the station frustrated but determined. Linda was building a fantasy empire, and people were starting to comply out of fear or confusion. The next day, I heard from my neighbor, Mrs. Clara Evans, a sweet retiree who'd lived in Meadowview for 30 years. She was in tears, holding a $200 fine for a pink flamingo lawn ornament she'd had since the 90s. "They said it was visually disruptive," she whispered. Another neighbor, Tom, a mechanic, got a notice for aggressive wind chimes. The absurdity was maddening, but the real kicker was that people were paying. Clara admitted she'd sent a check to the P.O. box, terrified of escalation. Linda wasn't just intimidating, she was profiting. I decided to dig deeper. A tip from the Facebook group led me to a Craigslist ad posted by a kid named Ethan Miller, a 19-year-old community college dropout. The ad sought community standards enforcers for $10 an hour, no background check required. I found Ethan outside the local 7-Eleven, wearing a paintball vest with an MCC Elite badge that looked like a refrigerator magnet. "You know this is illegal, right?" I said, trying to keep my tone calm. He shrugged, picking at a scuff on his sneaker. Linda said it's all legit. Gave us badges and everything. I pointed at the badge. That's not a badge. It's a craft project. Ethan pulled it out, and sure enough, it was glittery cursive on cheap plastic. Then he dropped a bombshell. She said if anyone causes trouble, we report them to the enforcement committee. Said we be protected under private arbitration. I froze. Private arbitration? Linda was staging fake courtrooms now. I thanked Ethan, snapped a photo of his badge, and headed home, my mind racing. The cease and desist letter clearly hadn't been enough. Linda was twisting the law like a pretzel, and the neighborhood was eating it up. That night, I followed another tip to the Meadowview Library, where Linda's so-called enforcement committee was meeting. I expected a conference room, but it was in the basement, behind a cracked door. I peeked inside and saw a folding table, 2 ring lights, and Linda in a judge's robies, a real robe reading from a book labeled Civic Codex. She was sentencing a woman for non-compliant mailbox decor. The woman, Mrs. Jenkins, was nodding and apologizing like she'd committed a felony. I pulled out my phone and recorded it all, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a power trip, it was a performance. I uploaded the footage to the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "Breaking, Linda Harper's fake court exposed." This is not satire. Within hours, the post went viral within Meadowview. Comments ranged from, "Is this a cult?" to, "I paid $75 for my mailbox paint." The local paper called me for a statement, but the real game changer was Channel 5 News. Reporter Jessica Holt showed up at my house, her heels clicking with purpose. "You're the guy who posted the fake trial?" she asked, already wiring me with a mic. "Let's expose this HOA scam." We filmed a segment outside the dog park. Linda tried to interrupt, shrieking, "You're not authorized to record on community property." Jessica didn't flinch. "This is a public sidewalk, Linda. And you're not an HOA woman with a clipboard and a delusion." Linda's face turned crimson, but she didn't back down. "We have legal standing," she told the camera. "Anyone who disrespects our authority will be removed." Jessica cut her off. "You're not an authority. You're a cosplayer with a vendetta." The clip aired 2 nights later and exploded online. Memes flooded the internet. Linda Harper, Minister of Mailbox Crimes, and welcome to MCC, where C stands for crazy. But beneath the laughter, the situation grew darker. Linda wasn't acting alone. The viral segment should have stopped her, but instead, she went quiet. No rants, no new flyers, no sidewalk sermons about hedge heights. For someone who thrived on attention, this silence was unnerving. Then, a manila envelope arrived at my house, marked urgent community concern. No return address. Inside were blueprints, real ones, stamped with city approval and covered in red pen notes. My heart sank as I realized what I was holding. A rezoning proposal for our entire block, submitted by a company called Springfield Property Ventures. The notes were chilling. One read, "Increase fines to build case for acquisition." Another, "Target non-HOA homes first, pressure via social code enforcement, then offer buyouts." Linda wasn't just playing HOA president. She was orchestrating a land grab, depressing property values to buy homes cheap under a corporate shell. She'd manufactured her fake council to wage psychological warfare, making life miserable until residents sold out. I scanned deeper and found signatures from board members tied to a shady LLC called Springfield Civic Solutions, with a rented UPS mailbox as its headquarters. I sent the file to Mark Reynolds, the city attorney. When he called back, he skipped pleasantries. "She's done," he said. "This is fraud on a new level." The city had approved the rezoning based on fake public comments, dozens of "I support the community vision" emails, all forged. One even used the name of a neighbor who'd been dead for 2 years. Linda had created a digital ghost army to push her scheme. Mark forwarded everything to the district attorney, but the real twist came when he found a priority routing slip signed by L. Hensley. A quick Google search revealed a real estate profile for a community strategist with a headshot of Linda in a blazer. She'd faked a professional identity to approve her own development pitch. My brain reeled. This wasn't just fake HOA Linda. This was Linda, developer, fake commenter, and civic mastermind. I passed everything to Channel 5. Jessica's producer nearly screamed. "This is Netflix-level stuff. HOA grifter tries to rezone a town and sell it back." We planned a second expose. Meanwhile, Linda must have sensed the noose tightening. Neighbors started getting official-looking letters offering buyout relief for homes struggling with compliance metrics. The offers were lowball, but tempting for those worn down by months of harassment. One elderly couple nearly signed after Linda cited their gutter color as non-conforming. But Linda made one fatal mistake. She filed the rezoning under both her fake company and her personal address, the same one tied to her P.O. box. She'd connected the dots for us, a paper trail to end all paper trails. The night before her arrest, Channel 5 aired the segment, Queen Linda, How One Woman Invented an HOA and Tried to Steal a Neighborhood. It racked up 1.5 million views in 24 hours. Linda's phone was disconnected. Her social media went dark. At 6:45 a.m., she was arrested outside her home, still in her signature visor, yelling about journalistic persecution as the cuffs clicked on. The morning of Linda Harper's arrest felt like a collective sigh of relief in Meadowview. The dog park reopened, its gates free of laminated decrees. Pink flamingos sprouted on lawns like defiant flowers, and Buddy's park access card was reactivated with a note from the parks department. Give this good boy unlimited access. No HOA nonsense. But the calm was short-lived. Linda's schemes had left scars, and the neighborhood wasn't about to let her fade into obscurity without consequences. What followed was a cascade of lawsuits, revelations, and a punishment so fitting it felt scripted by fate. The first blow came from a retired paralegal named Margaret Walsh, who lived 3 streets over. Margaret, a no-nonsense woman with a penchant for color-coded binders, filed a class-action lawsuit on behalf of everyone Linda had fined, harassed, or intimidated under her fake Meadowview Community Enhancement Council. Her 50-page complaint was a masterpiece, calling Linda Defendant Harper self-styled monarch of suburban delusion. I printed and framed that page. Within days, more lawsuits piled on. A single mom, Rachel, sued for emotional distress after being cited for a disorderly porch design. A disabled veteran, Carl, took action over a fine for his wheelchair ramp, labeled an aesthetic interference. A young couple, the Parkers, went after Linda for fining their non-neutral string lights. Each suit demanded financial damages and, in Carl's case, compensation for lawn-related trauma. The city joined the fray, filing a civil fraud complaint. Linda had billed Springfield for $15,000 in community planning sessions that never happened unless you counted her folding chair rants in a parking lot. But the real bombshell came from the IRS. Linda had reported her fake fines as business income on a 1099, listing her occupation as civic consultant. She hadn't paid taxes on the $6,000 she'd collected from 35 households, landing her a federal tax fraud charge that hit harder than any of her violation stickers. When her mugshot hit the local news, it was like a neighborhood holiday. Someone turned it into a yard sign. Linda got fined. Tax evasion edition. Another neighbor made coffee mugs. Linda didn't go quietly. From her jail cell, she filed a handwritten motion claiming she was a victim of suburban political persecution, comparing herself to a modern-day Joan of Arc. The judge didn't bother responding. Her next move was bolder, a lawsuit against the city for emotional sabotage, arguing that the cease and desist letter's font and aggressive legal tone triggered PTSD. The legal community had a field day. A local attorney tweeted, "Linda Harper's brief is a wild ride. Strong start, but tanks when she claims psychic HOA powers." Every lawsuit unearthed more dirt. A subpoena of Linda's Venmo records revealed payments to a notary named Victor Grant, a man with a revoked license who'd notarized her fake HOA documents. When reporters tracked him down, he was living in a storage unit. "Linda promised me a board seat," he said. "Said we'd be the Rockefellers of lawn regulation." Her court-appointed attorney tried to distance her from the mess, filing a motion claiming Linda's mental state may not distinguish civic ambition from unlawful governance. A psychiatrist evaluated her, noting signs of narcissistic fixation and authoritarian delusion, but deeming her competent to stand trial and possibly start a cult. The community's anger shifted from justice to annihilation. A petition called Ban the HOA Tyrant gathered 120,000 signatures. Another resident, inspired by Buddy's early warnings, proposed renaming the dog park Buddy's Freedom Field. But the most personal blow came from Linda's own niece, Emily Harper, who sued for defamation. Linda had cited Emily's garden gnomes as excessive, damaging her Etsy business and her emotional trust in wind chimes. In a deposition, Emily revealed Linda's lifelong obsession with control, including grounding her as a child for non-compliant handwriting on a birthday card. The courtroom became a stage for Meadowview's reckoning. Linda sat at the defendant's table, her signature visor gone, her hair pulled back tightly. The judge presiding was none other than Daniel Carter, who'd signed the original cease and desist. When Linda recognized him, she gasped. "You're biased against my vision," she cried. Judge Carter barely looked up. "Ma'am, I'm biased against fake paperwork posing as law." He banged his gavel, denying her motion for recusal. When the verdict came, the courtroom buzzed with a mix of cheers and stunned silence. Linda was found guilty on 7 counts: fraud, impersonation of a public authority, filing false zoning documents, and tax evasion. Judge Carter paused, his lips twitching as if suppressing a smile. "Given the unique nature of the defendant's crimes," he said, "and in the spirit of poetic justice, this court sentences Ms. Linda Harper to 500 hours of community service at the Pinewood Homeowners Association, under strict supervision." The room went still. Pinewood HOA was notorious, a labyrinth of bylaws so strict they held an annual compliance gala. Its president, Barbara Klein, a former Marine logistics officer, ran it like a military base. "We've heard about Linda," Barbara told Channel 5. "She'll learn what real enforcement looks like." The irony was exquisite. Linda, who'd faked an HOA to rule Meadowview, was now sentenced to serve in one that would break her. Her first day at Pinewood was a spectacle. Linda arrived in her visor, still trying to assert dominance. "I'll lead the landscaping team," she declared. Barbara handed her a neon pink pooper scooper. "You're on dog waste duty. Buddy and I visited that week." He did his business twice while Linda glared, her face a mask of humiliated fury. Her next task was worse, writing 89 handwritten apology letters to every resident she'd find, each vetted by Pinewood's Correction Committee, a group of volunteers who wore robes and took their roles as seriously as a Supreme Court panel. Linda cried after her first meeting. Every day at Pinewood was a lesson in humility. Linda, who'd once wielded clipboards like weapons, now filled out triplicate forms for tasks as mundane as trash bin placement. Her flair for petty punishments was crushed under Pinewood's bureaucracy. An 85-year-old committee member, Evelyn, fired a volunteer for not rinsing a recycling bin properly. When Linda muttered, "I invented my own HOA," Evelyn snapped, "And now you're in ours." The community began to heal, but Linda's punishment wasn't the only victory. Meadowview was transforming. Neighbors who'd once waved politely now gathered for coffee, swapping stories of Linda's citations. The dog park became a hub of laughter, not fear. But the real triumph was yet to come, a move so bold it would cement Linda's defeat and turn her legacy into a warning for the ages. The air in Meadowview felt lighter after Linda Harper's arrest, as if the neighborhood had shed a heavy coat of dread. Lawns bloomed with unapproved petunias, and wind chimes tinkled defiantly in the breeze. But beneath the surface, the scars of Linda's reign lingered. Her fake Meadowview Community Enhancement Council had shaken trust, and residents weren't content with just her conviction. They wanted to ensure no one could ever pull a stunt like hers again. What unfolded next was a masterclass in community resilience, poetic justice, and a touch of gleeful revenge that would make Linda's laminated flyers look like child's play. Pinewood HOA's bureaucratic boot camp was breaking Linda, but Meadowview wasn't done. At the 3-month mark of her community service, word spread that Linda's pristine home, her fortress of suburban tyranny, was going up for sale. The lawsuits, legal fees, and $45,000 in IRS penalties had drained her finances. A foreclosure notice appeared on her lawn, taped to the very mailbox she'd once cited for improper gloss levels. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Margaret Walsh, the retired paralegal who'd spearheaded the class action suit, saw an opportunity. She rallied a group of neighbors: Sarah the librarian, Ethan the former clipboard kid turned whistleblower, and a dozen others, and they formed an LLC called Meadowview Unity Collective. The acronym, MUC, was a subtle jab. In a move that felt like it was ripped from a movie script, they pooled their money and bought Linda's house outright in a cash deal, no realtors involved. When Linda found out, a neighbor reported seeing her sobbing in the parking lot of the local pharmacy, clutching a bottle of aspirin. But the collective didn't stop at buying the house. They transformed it into the Meadowview Flamingo Museum, a shrine to Linda's overreach and a celebration of the neighborhood's defiance. The front lawn became an installation titled The Line Between Order and Obsession, featuring 80 flamingos, each bearing a quote from one of Linda's citations. One read, "Wind chimes exceeding 5 decibels are prohibited." Another, "Holiday lights must align with neutral cheer standards." My favorite, "Flamingos incite aesthetic rebellion." Inside, the house was preserved as a time capsule of Linda's madness. Her living room, with its infamous clipboard wall, became the main exhibit. Visitors could take an audio tour narrated by Jessica Holt from Channel 5, who delivered each line with the perfect mix of gravitas and sarcasm. The tour ended in Linda's former office, now called the Cease and Desist Chamber. On the desk sat a laser-engraved replica of Judge Carter's letter, framed in gold. A guest book, titled Citations of the Soul, invited visitors to share their own stories of HOA trauma. Entries ranged from "My gnome was fined for smiling too brightly" to "Linda said my mailbox tilted 0.3 degrees off-center." The museum wasn't just a middle finger to Linda, it was a rallying point for Meadowview. The grand opening coincided with the first annual Flamingo Fest, a block party celebrating free expression and unregulated lawn decor. The event featured a flamingo costume contest, a piñata shaped like a violation sticker, and a parody competition called the Linda Off, where residents competed to issue the pettiest fake citation. The winner that year, residents cited for sipping coffee too loudly during quiet hours. The crowd roared as the winner accepted a plastic flamingo trophy. Linda, unsurprisingly, didn't attend. Word was she'd moved to a condo in another state, one with no HOA and zero landscaping duties. But the museum and festival were more than catharsis, they were a statement. Meadowview had turned Linda's weaponized control into a symbol of unity. The neighborhood that once barely knew each other now gathered regularly, not for potlucks or forced block parties, but for storytelling nights at the library, organized by Sarah. Dubbed Citation Nation, these events let residents share tales of surviving Linda's reign. Margaret's annotated lawsuit binder, now behind museum glass, became a local legend. Buddy even landed on the community calendar, captioned "Hero Dog Who Barked at Tyranny." The deeper impact was in the trust that grew. Neighbors started checking in on each other. When a pipe burst at the Wilsons' house, 6 people showed up with tools before they even asked. When an elderly widow, Mrs. Larson, faced a shady contractor, Rachel and Carl escorted her to City Hall, ensuring she wasn't scammed. Meadowview wasn't just a place, Anna Maria, it was a tribe, forged in the crucible of Linda's laminated tyranny. The city took notice, too. Springfield launched an anti-fraud initiative called Safeguard Springfield, inspired by Linda's scams. It aimed to catch HOA abuses and zoning fraud, with pink brochures that felt like a wink to the flamingos. Local high schools added the Linda Files to their civics curriculum, using her story to teach about ethics and community governance. The Flamingo Museum drew 12,000 visitors in its first year, not just locals but tourists who left with a new appreciation for the power of collective resistance. Yet, even as Meadowview thrived, Linda's shadow lingered. Rumors swirled that she was plotting a comeback, maybe not in Springfield, but somewhere else. A reporter from Channel 5 tried to track her down for a "Where Are They Now?" segment, but she slammed the door before they could say compliance. Her name became a cautionary tale, whispered in HOA boardrooms and dog parks alike. But the neighborhood wasn't done with her legacy. One final, devastating move was coming, one that would ensure Linda could never wield power again, in Meadowview or anywhere else. It started quietly, in a courtroom no one expected to revisit. The city's legal counsel filed a motion for a permanent civic disqualification, a rare penalty reserved for those who posed an ongoing threat to community governance. Linda sat at the defendant's table, her once impeccable posture slouched, her visor replaced by a plain ponytail. The new judge, Ellen Hayes, Judge Carter, had recused himself, saying he'd had enough HOA drama for a lifetime, read the motion with a calm that belied its weight. "Ms. Harper," she said, "this concerns your permanent exclusion from any civic leadership role." Linda's voice was barely audible. "Permanent what?" The prosecutor laid it out like a poet. Due to her fraud, impersonation, and creation of a fake enforcement squad, Linda was deemed a danger to legitimate governance. She was banned for life from organizing, leading, or even participating in any HOA, neighborhood committee, or community board. The judge clarified, she's not allowed within 100 feet of a clipboard during a vote. The courtroom erupted in gasps and muffled laughter. I covered my mouth to keep from cheering. It was real. She wasn't just sentenced. She was erased from the game she loved most. The ruling went further. Linda had to register with a civic oversight registry for 10 years. Anytime she moved to a new neighborhood, she'd have to notify local officials of her history as a regulatory impersonator. They issued her a laminated card, a cruel twist stating, "This resident is under court-ordered civic restriction. Report any attempts to initiate rules or organizations to municipal authorities." Someone posted the card on the neighborhood Facebook group, and it got 4,000 likes in hours. Comments included, "Live, laugh, cease and desist," and "I'm framing this next to my flamingo." Linda's own home, now the Flamingo Museum, fell under a real HOA after the rezoning scam was undone. She couldn't attend their meetings, but they cited her for improper hedge height within weeks. She reportedly called the compliance officer, sobbing, "I used to be the compliance officer." The response was ice cold. "Ma'am, I don't make the rules. I enforce them." For once, Linda had no comeback. The Meadowview Flamingo Museum stood as a vibrant testament to the neighborhood's victory over Linda Harper's tyranny, its pink plastic birds glinting under the Springfield sun. But the story didn't end with her arrest, her 500 hours of dog waste duty, or even her permanent ban from civic leadership. Meadowview had one final act to ply, a move so bold, so perfectly crafted, that it sealed Linda's defeat in a way that felt like the universe itself was applauding. This wasn't just about closing a chapter. It was about rewriting the rules of community, ensuring no one could ever wield a clipboard like a weapon again. And in doing so, Meadowview transformed from a quiet suburb into a beacon of defiance and unity. The museum's first anniversary marked a turning point. Flamingo Fest had grown from a block party into a regional event, drawing thousands to Meadowview's streets. The Linda-Off parody competition was the highlight, with residents vying for the most absurd fake citation. This year's winner, resident fined for planting daisies with excessive optimism. The crowd howled as the victor, a teenager named Mia, accepted her flamingo trophy, striking a pose like she'd won an Oscar. The piñata, shaped like one of Linda's neon violation stickers, burst open to cheers, showering candy and tiny paper cease and desist letters. But beneath the laughter, something deeper was at work. Meadowview wasn't just mocking Linda, it was reclaiming its soul. The museum itself had become a cultural phenomenon. Its cease and desist chamber drew visitors from across the state, each leaving notes in the citations of the sole guest book. One entry read, "My old HOA fined me for a birdhouse that clashed with community vibes. Thank you, Meadowview, for fighting back." Another, "Linda tried to fine my cat for loitering. This museum is justice." The audio tour, narrated by Jessica Holt, was downloaded 20,000 times in its first year, her voice guiding tourists through Linda's war room with lines like, "Here, Ms. Harper planned her assault on wind chimes and free expression." The centerpiece, the engraved cease and desist letter, was photographed so often it became a social media icon, #NoMoreLindis. But the real triumph came in the form of a final, community-driven blow. Margaret Walsh, Sarah the librarian, and Ethan, now a local hero for turning on Linda, weren't satisfied with the museum alone. They wanted a permanent safeguard against future tyrants. So, they petitioned the city to create a Meadowview Covenant, a legally binding neighborhood charter that banned any HOA or similar group from forming without unanimous resident consent. It also required transparency for any community rules, with public votes and no anonymous PO boxes allowed. The charter passed in a landslide at a town hall meeting, with 98% of residents voting yes. The 2% who didn't? They were out of town. The covenant wasn't just a legal document, it was a declaration of independence. It ensured that no one could pull a Linda Harper again, not in Meadowview. The city council, still stinging from the rezoning scam, went further. They expanded the Safeguard Springfield initiative into a statewide model, training officials to spot fake HOAs and zoning fraud. The program's logo? A flamingo holding a gavel. Schools across Springfield adopted the Linda Files as a case study, teaching kids about civic responsibility and the dangers of unchecked power. One teacher told Channel 5, "My students love it. They call Linda the Darth Vader of suburbia." Meanwhile, Linda's life unraveled completely. After finishing her community service at Pinewood HOA, where she was last seen cataloging garden gnomes under the watchful eye of an 86-year-old named Doris, she moved to a small condo in a neighboring state. She'd changed her name, according to a persistent reporter, but couldn't escape her past. A local blog tracked her down, reporting she lived in a gated community with no HOA, where she kept her lawn bare to avoid attention. When asked about Meadowview, she shut the door, muttering about fake news. Her laminated civic restriction card, now a collector's item in Springfield, ensured she'd never organize so much as a book club without scrutiny. Back in Meadowview, the neighborhood flourished. The dog park, officially renamed Buddy's Freedom Field, became a gathering spot for residents who now knew each other by name. Storytelling nights at the library grew so popular that Sarah had to add a second session each month. Margaret, now a minor celebrity, was invited to speak at a national homeowners' rights conference, her lawsuit binder under her arm like a badge of honor. Even Ethan found redemption, enrolling in community college to study urban planning, determined to make cities better, not scarier. The real magic, though, was in the small moments. Neighbors helped each other without being asked, fixing fences, sharing tools, or dropping off casseroles during tough times. When a new family moved in, they were greeted with a welcome basket and a playful warning: no clipboards allowed. Meadowview had become a community not just of houses, but of people bound by a shared victory over tyranny. The Flamingo Museum, now a nonprofit run by volunteers, donated its proceeds to local charities, ensuring Linda's former fortress served the common good. The final twist came a year later, at the second Flamingo Fest. As the crowd gathered for the Lindy-off, a surprise announcement silenced the chatter. The Meadowview Unity Collective had purchased the last of Linda's assets, her infamous P.O. box. They turned it into a community mailbox for anonymous compliments, where residents could send notes of kindness to one another. The first note, pinned to the museum's bulletin board, read, "To Meadowview, you turned a bully's game into a neighborhood's heart. Thank you." It was signed, simply, a friend. As I walked Buddy past the museum one evening, he barked at the flamingo statue we called the Enforcer, a plastic bird clutching a tiny clipboard. I smiled, not just at the absurdity, but at what it represented. Meadowview wasn't perfect. We had our squabbles, our messy lawns, our occasional loud parties. But we were free to plant neon flowers, hang mismatched lights, or let our dogs bark without fear of a fine. Linda had tried to control us, to profit from our fear, but she'd underestimated the power of a community united. She lost her empire, her name, and her voice. We gained each other. This wasn't just a story about one woman's downfall. It was a reminder that power, when wielded without decency, crumbles under scrutiny. It was about the courage to stand up, the strength to laugh, and the beauty of turning a battleground into a celebration. Every flamingo on our lawns, every wind chime in our yards, was a middle finger to anyone who thought they could rule through fear. And as I looked at Buddy, chasing his tennis ball under the setting sun, I knew we'd done more than win. We'd built something unbreakable. What do you think about the Meadowview saga? Have you ever faced a bully like Linda in your own neighborhood, workplace, or life? How did you fight back or wish you had? Share your stories in the comments below, especially about moments of injustice or overreach that sparked change. Do you believe communities should have strict rules to maintain order, or does freedom matter more? Take a stand and let us know your perspective. Your voice could inspire the next Flamingo Fest.